Rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel.
Here.
Councilmember Naxtat.
Here.
Councilmember Petty.
Here.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Here.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Here.
Councilmember Navarre.
Here.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Here.
Mayor Gabriel, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Welcome, everybody. Next, we have agenda approval. And Council, before we get to agenda approval, I'd like to call your attention to a laydown you should have in front of you with requested revisions to the agenda packet. Action, add to item D for ordinance number 3133-2020, memo requesting postponement requested by the city manager. Action, add to item D12, resolution number 2020-45, public comment requested by the city clerk. Action, add to item G9, ordinance number 3141-2020, draft agreement requested by the city manager. Action, add item G13, action approval, resolution number 2020-22, memo requesting to amend something previously adopted, requested by the city manager. And action, add to item J1, city manager's report, library report, requested by the city manager. Pleasure, council. Councilmember or Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve the agenda with the requested revisions to the agenda packet listed by the mayor and request unanimous consent.
Second.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next, we have the consent agenda. Councilmember Naxtat.
I move for approval of the consent agenda. Request unanimous consent.
Second.
Is there any council member that would like to amend the consent agenda at this time? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please read the consent agenda into the record?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Tonight on your consent agenda, you have approval of invoices to be or bills to be ratified, brought forth by administration. We have approval of FY21 budget purchase orders over $15,000 brought forth by administration. Approval of a special use permit to the Kenai Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center for Moose Meat John Cabin brought forth by administration. Introduction of Ordinance 3136-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general and public safety capital project funds and authorizing the sole source purchase and installation of updated radio consoles for the City of Kenai Dispatch Center brought forth by administration with a public hearing on July 1st. Introduction of Ordinance number 3137-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general and municipal roadway improvements capital project funds to provide matching funds to the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities to construct a pedestrian path from the Kenai Spur Highway to Beaver Loop along Bridge Access Road, utilizing restricted general fund balance brought forth by administration with a public hearing on July 1st. Introduction of Ordinance number 3138-2020, increasing fiscal year 2020's estimated revenues and appropriations in the Airport Land Sale Permanent Fund to transfer earnings in excess of budgeted amounts to the city's airport fund, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on July 1st. Introduction of Ordinance number 3139-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the COVID-19 CARES Act Recovery Fund for a federal CARES Act grant passed through the State of Alaska Department of Public Safety for overtime and direct expenditures of the police, fire, and communications departments of the city from March 16th, 2020 through May 17th, 2020, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on July 1st. Introduction of Ordinance number 3140-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Personal Use Fisheries Special Revenue Fund to provide supplemental funding for additional portable restrooms and to award a contract to provide dumpsters, portable restrooms, and portable hand wash stations for the 2020 Kenai River Personal Use Fishery, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on July 1st. Introduction of Ordinance number 3141-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the General Fund, Visitor Center Department, and authorizing amendment to the facility management agreement with the Kenai Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center, Inc. for the operation and management of the Kenai Visitor Center and Kenai Visitor and Cultural Center, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on July 1st. And introduction of ordinance number 3143-2020, increasing general fund estimated revenues and appropriations by $34,216 in the general fund, Parks, Recreation, and Beautification Department for an increase of a grant from the United States Environmental Protection Agency passed through the State of Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation for bacteria level monitoring on the city's beaches from July 1, 2020 through March 1, 2021, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on July 1st. And that is your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to any item that was on the consent agenda?
And you have no one on Zoom, so.
Thank you. Nobody wanting to testify or nobody at all?
Nobody at all.
Okay, that'll make it easier. Unanimous consent was requested for approval of the consent agenda. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. That brings us to scheduled public comments, which we have none this evening. Under unscheduled public comments, is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council on any item that is not on the agenda or a consent agenda at this time? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move to public hearings. Item D1, ordinance number 3117-2020, appropriating funds in the airport fund, accepting a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration, and appropriating funds in the airport equipment capital project fund for the purchase of new snow removal equipment, SCR, loader and attachments. It's brought forward by administration. There's a clerk's note at the May 20th meeting. This item was postponed to the June 17th council meeting. A motion to enact is on the floor, and I will make a note that there is a substitute ordinance accompanying this. Pleasure, Council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to amend ordinance number 3117-2020 with substitute ordinance number 3177-2020.
Second.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to substitute ordinance number 3117-2020? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, discussion from council? Seeing or hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next, we have item D2, ordinance number 3131-2020, amending the official Kenai zoning map by rezoning a portion
Mayor
of.
Gabriel? We
Oh,
that
we
was
just,
voting on the
I'm sorry, yes, we did. We now have before us substitute ordinance number 3117-2020. Pleasure, council. Comments, deliberation from council? Yeah, okay. Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll. Sorry
Councilmember
about that.
Naxtat?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Motion passes.
We are now on item D2, ordinance number 3131-2020, amending the official Kenai zoning map by rezoning a portion of south 1/2, southeast 1/4, southwest 1/4, lying north of K Beach Road, excluding VIP Country Estates subdivision Part 5 from rural residential to limited commercial. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxtat.
I move to enact ordinance 3131-2020.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3131-2020? Seeing or hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council. Councilmember Naxtat.
Just a couple of things. In the packet here, I wanted to thank Elizabeth, our planner. She provided this to planning and zoning as well as us. There's a comparison between the RR zone and the commercial zone, and what is approved and what the differences are. And in fact, well, you can draw your own conclusions, but it's a fair comparison, so we know what that zone change is. I just wanted to thank her for that. And also, I appreciate the comments we received in writing, and I think that person may have also zoomed in at the Planning and Zoning meeting with some concerns and had been talking to our Planning Commission, our Director, and unfortunately she's not here tonight to express her concerns. I just kind of wanted to point out that her concerns are, I don't know if they're valid, but as far as changing a zone really is just changing just that table that we were looking at, the types of uses, and it really doesn't have to do with the access and some of those other things that will actually, if it gets subdivided, that will be a plat, and anybody within whatever 300 feet will be notified, and they'll have another opportunity to comment on that plat at that time. And then furthermore, after it does get subdivided and somebody wants to have a development there, then there'll be perhaps another opportunity depending on what that might actually be. But just changing a zone is really just the use that table, and not the consistency of the road or any of that kind of stuff, and where the access is necessarily. So I'll be supporting it because I do believe that it is consistent with other zones in the area.
Councilmember Glendenny.
Yes, yeah, I too will be supporting this. I've been following it in the literature and listened in on a Zoom meeting, and it was a very thorough and rational discussion, and based on the revelations that I see in the packet and what I heard in the meetings, I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion from council? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Following up on my colleague's comments, and I recognize the written comments of landowners on Baleen on the other side, Jason Parks and Hannah Parks that are in the packet, and I think they do make some good points that I'm sure that the Planning and Zoning Commission would consider when there is a project, that's for that may require a conditional use permit. Some of the recommendations that they're making as far as vehicle access and a buffer for trees seem reasonable, and that's something that I'm sure the Planning and Zoning Commission would consider in the context of a conditional use permit if there was a project for use that required a conditional use permit after the rezone. So, I'd encourage them to continue their dialogue with planning regarding any future project that may require a permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Malloy. Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I just wanted to say I appreciate you saying it, because I wanted to sort of point that same concern out that particularly regarding the buffer, and then anything beyond a development of that process that it would go through that would address some of those concerns. I did have a question, probably maybe for the planner, Ms. Appleby, under their intended use or reason for rezoning, they had put down to provide economic opportunity for small business startups and home-based businesses to live and work at one location. Can you expand on that through the city manager, or maybe Paul can too, either way? But
yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I would like Elizabeth to speak to that, but Elizabeth, you'll need to walk up there and turn the mic on to speak to it.
Okay. Mayor Gabriel, thank you for your question. The applicant has indicated they would like to have a development where it would assist people in starting small businesses where they may not have the capital to both own a home and pay for a space for their business. So she was envisioning where someone could have a business on the bottom floor and then like a residence at the top, or some style where someone would live on the site of their business. And that kind of development is allowed in the limited commercial zone. And at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, she pointed out that if she planned to do that, then she would also have some concerns in developing this to be marketable for someone to live. So she wanted to point that out as that her own development has a potential residential piece that she would need to be conscious of in developing the property.
Okay, so with that type of scenario, and it's allowed, is it allowed under a conditional use permit, or is it permitted under the land use table?
Mayor Gabriel, it might depend on what
Type of business, okay, that's what I was wondering.
So if I look, so the first page of the land use table, so the residential, I can at least answer that one. So it's 1, 2, and 3 family dwellings are principally permitted, but once you get to a 4-family dwelling, it would require a conditional use permit. That's the same for, that's not a change from the RR zone. You can actually have up to a 4-family dwelling in the rural residential zone. I suppose your question was on the mixed type of use.
Yeah,
like
more on the
same
commercial
building.
side of.
Yeah, honestly, it would probably just depend on what kind of business they're developing. There's a footnote, I think.
And I guess where I was going with it, just sort of to maybe anybody that was potentially listening, is that, for instance, like automotive sales aren't allowed under limited commercial, and they are allowed under rural residential, so it's almost like more restrictive, even not even allowed under conditional use. So it's sort of my idea to think of envisioning people that if this type of development goes through, that, you know, it you know, may not be as impactful as people might imagine it would be to that area.
Yes, Mayor Gabriel, I'll just add in the information in the packet, I tried to highlight that the rural residential zone, you can get a conditional use permit for an RV park, for surface extraction. So the limited commercial would not allow for those types of uses, but it is a little bit more friendly for like professional offices and those types of business developments.
I think you just summed it up better than I could have said it, so I appreciate that. And I appreciate, as Councilor Nax said, the way you laid this out and highlighted the land use tables, comparing the two is very helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other discussion, questions, deliberation from council? Thank you, Ms. Appleby. And with that, will clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We're now on item D3, ordinance number 3132-2020, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations by $554.84 in the general fund, police department for drug investigation overtime expenditures brought forward by administration. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxtat.
I move to enact ordinance 3132, 2020.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3132-2020? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Any comments, deliberation from council? Seeing and hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yeah.
Councilmember Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We're on item D4, ordinance number 3133-2020, authorizing a budget transfer in the Airport Terminal Improvement Capital Project Fund and appropriating fiscal year 2020 budget funds in the airport master plan capital project, airport snow removal equipment and airport operations facility improvement capital project funds for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, or HVAC, improvement to the airport operations facility and replacement of the airport's wide area mower, and this is brought forward by administration. And also note there was a substitute ordinance accompanying this one. Pleasure, council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'll move to enact ordinance number 3131, 2020.
Second?
31, 33.
Yeah, 3133-2020.
Second.
Okay, very good.
I heard it different, sorry.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3133-2020? Seeing and hearing none, I'll bring it back to council. And I'll note there was a memo that was in the laydown, brought forward by the city manager. Councilmember Nexon.
Well, I just have a question. We have a substitute, but also a request for postponement. Should we postpone the substitute or just postpone the main? Is that the intent?
Excuse me, through the mayor, Councilmember Nex said, I'd like you to move to substitute and then postpone, please.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Vice-
thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember.
I move to amend ordinance 3133, 2020 by moving substitute ordinance 3133, 2020.
Second. Request unanimous consent.
Is there any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, we now have substitute ordinance 3133-2020 before us. Pleasure, Councilmember Nexon.
I move to postpone ordinance 3133, 2020 to our July 15th meeting.
Second.
Request unanimous consent.
Very good. Is there any objection to unanimous consent to postpone substitute ordinance 3133-2022 to the July 15th meeting?
Point of order.
I think our city manager might have
Oh.
a comment here.
Okay. Well, it's on the floor, so Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. You know, we were hoping that we could get this back to you by July 1st, potentially. I actually think, and I was looking at Terry to make sure, July 15th is still going to be fine if we move it to then. So I'm okay with the motion as it is.
Okay. Councilmember Petty.
Do we have 2 council meetings in July?
Yes, we do.
Traditionally-
I asked,
I'm just
clerk-
trying to get an understanding of what's going on.
yeah, and Councilmember Nax had brought that up. I caught that in the, normally we wouldn't, but since there was 5 Wednesdays in July, then we do have a second meeting. Otherwise, there would have been 6 weeks between meetings. So it is scheduled, yes. Okay. Councilmember Nax.
I guess I wouldn't have a problem amending my motion to July 1st if that gives the administration some additional opportunity in case things happen quicker than you think. Or, it was unclear in the memo. I zoomed in on July 15th as the date. We can postpone again at that time.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. That was what my initial hesitation is. Based on where this ordinance has been over the last 3 weeks, I'm guessing that the 15th is the realistic number, which is why I think the 15th is going to be realistic, so I'm okay with that.
Is there any, Councilmember Peterkin?
Yeah, not a big deal, but maybe it's just because I don't understand how things work that good, but the numbers look the same as the first one as the second one to me.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you. Through the mayor, Councilmember Peterkin. So if you look in the substitute, some of the numbers have been replaced with X's.
I just meant the ordinance number 3133 2020, and then 30. We're replacing it with 30.
Yeah, so in your
133.
in your packet.
Oh, so you just use
Yeah.
the same number.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah,
no
because
problem.
we are substituting it. Is there any discussion on postponement to the July 15th meeting? Unanimous consent was requested. Is there an objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, we will have this substitute ordinance in 3133-2020 on our July 15th agenda. Next, we have item D5, ordinance number 3134-2020, appropriating funds in the water and sewer improvement and wastewater treatment facility improvement and capital project funds for fiscal year 2021 capital improvement plans project, requested by administration. Pleasure of council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to enact ordinance 3134-2020.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3134-2020? Hearing and seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council. Councilmember Naxton.
I think there's some wonderful things happening in this ordinance. I just wondered if the city manager might want to talk about what the blower does and those kind of things for us.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Naxted. Yeah, so these are all the items that were budgeted for this fiscal year. As you know, we've been making significant improvements, particularly like the wastewater treatment plant, but also in the water treatment and transportation. So this does provide for SCADA integration on the wastewater and water side, which is something that's long overdue for the city, really being able to keep a good eye on what's going on in the system is something that SCADA will allow us to do. In addition to that, the digester blower replacement and building construction, which is $750,000. Those blowers are badly in need of replacement, and they will not only be upgraded, but we're anticipating there will be significant cost savings associated with the facility once those are installed. So yeah, several projects that are long overdue and will lower overall operational costs and make the plant more efficient.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, excuse me. This will also give us more certainty maintaining our certification, correct? We'd be more efficient, be able to monitor with the was it supervised control and data acquisition system. Actually, a fellow would be able to take his iPad and monitor it from a distance, which would add to efficiency. So I think this is just splendid, and I urge more of this. Thank you.
Any other discussion on ordinance number 3134-2020? Seeing or hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat?
Yes?
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We're on item D5, ordinance number 3135-2020, appropriating fiscal year 2020 budget funds in the Kenai Multipurpose Facility Improvements Capital Project Fund for installation of an exhaust fan and corrosion remediation, brought forward by administration. Pleasure of council.
I'd like to introduce ordinance number 3135-2020.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general?
Excuse me, enact.
Yeah.
Enact.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3135-2020? Seeing none or hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Any comments from council? Councilmember Peterkin.
I just want to say thank you for putting this in, and I hope it passes. It's something that's also badly needed in our city. We really need ventilation in there, and I'm glad to see us putting money into that facility.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, I too will be supporting this. I see where the hockey affiliation during the winter especially, but also in the summertime when the building is used, adds just value to our town, to the fabric of our town. The young people, even, well, I don't skate anymore, but I could see the benefit. Maybe I should. But it's just a wonderful, wonderful outlet for the citizens, not only of our town, but of the area. And thank you for doing that.
Councilmember Naxton.
I will be supporting it also, but I do have a question of the city manager on this one as well. Corrosion remediation, I was wondering what the remediation is, how severe the corrosion is, and where it is.
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Naxted, so the corrosion is in the roof structure, and it's from the excess humidity and condensation that's created, I think particularly during the summer months when we have ice in the facility. The exhaust fans will help to remove that in the future. The corrosion, the extent of the corrosion, I don't know if we know that necessarily yet until we get up there and get a closer look at it. But it really is about removing the existing rust corrosion that's up there, recoating that, and then putting in the exhaust fans to keep it from happening in the future.
So do we anticipate that to be kind of a manual labor? Take the corrosion off and then repaint, and then the fan's a fan, but
Mr.
Through
Ostrander?
the mayor, Councilmember Naxted, I assume so. I have not talked specifically about what that project looks like when it's done. Thank you.
Any other discussion on ordinance number 3135-2020? I do have a quick question. Is there ice in the facility now? I mean, is it being utilized like it normally would be, Mr. Ostrander, for the summer months, or because of COVID, has that affected that at all?
Mayor Gabriel, I don't believe there is ice in it currently. It wasn't initially. I don't think that is now. That could have changed in the last couple of weeks, but as far as I know, there's not ice in it currently.
Okay, so I guess where I was going with that is if this, assuming this gets approved, what sounds like it probably will be, when would be your time you'd sort of schedule that that work to be done?
I would hope that it could be done, likely, since it's not going to be done immediately. I'm guessing when it would be done is when the ice is out between the winter and the next year's summer.
Okay.
Is when I would hope that it would be completed.
Okay, next springtime then. Okay, very good. Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, and I don't think that I own a corrosion company. I don't think we're gonna bid on this, but I just want to disclose that. I haven't discussed it with my partners or our management, but there's a potential. Our company does this kind of work, so, but I'm glad to not vote on it.
Well, that might be a legal question because it would still, if you didn't vote on it, I don't know if you would still be able to bid on it. I guess that would be a question for Mr. Bloom, as far as your company goes. Mr. Bloom?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I think at this point it's fine for him to vote on this. If we were to award a contract and that contract came before this council, then I think would be the appropriate time to abstain from voting.
That's what I was thinking. So you're good to go, Councilmember Peterkin. Any other discussion on 3135-2020?
Mayor Gabriel?
Oh,
It's been brought to my attention that it needs to be amended to FY 2021.
oh. Would anybody care to make that amendment? Vice Mayor Malloy?
I'm gonna look at the ordinance super fast and just,
Move to amend ordinance number 3135-2020 to substitute FY 2021 wherever FY 2020 appears.
Second, request unanimous consent.
Any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, that amendment is approved. Yes, Councilmember.
I'd just like to find out I understand what's going on, but why, I mean, does that mean the work couldn't be done until 2021 or no?
fiscal year 2021
Yeah.
starts on July 1st.
Starts July 1st, yeah. So the work would be after July 1st, and that's when those funds would be expended for that work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's because of our fiscal year. Yeah, I get hung up on that myself all the time.
I was just hoping work could be done while we're shut down this year, but it doesn't sound like it.
The fiscal year starts July 1st, 2020.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah. Yeah, calendar year versus, yeah. So we now have before us ordinance number 3135-2020 as amended. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Oh, no, we can't do this. We now have ordinance number 3135-2020 as amended before us. Any further discussion? Seeing or hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Navarre,
Here, or yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes, I'm here.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we're now on item D7, ordinance number 3142-2020, increasing fiscal year 2021 estimated revenues and appropriations in the general, personal use and fishery special revenue and senior citizen special revenue funds for fiscal year 2021 insurance coverage. And I will note that this is being introduced and, proposed to be introduced and passed this evening. So there will be a motion to introduce. If that's approved, a motion for a second reading, which would require unanimous vote. And assuming that we got that, then a motion to adopt, which would require 5 affirmative votes. So with that, pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move to introduce ordinance 3142, 2020.
Second?
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3142-2020? Seeing and hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. For discussion, for introduction? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Councilmember Naxton.
I move a motion for a second reading, request unanimous consent.
Second.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, a motion for second reading is approved. So we have ordinance number 3142-2020, increasing fiscal year 2021 estimated revenues and appropriations in the general personal use fishery special revenue and senior citizen special revenue funds for the fiscal year 2020 insurance coverage brought forward by administration. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move to enact ordinance 3142, 2020.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3142-2020? Seeing or hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council. Mr. Eubank, did you want to give us an overview of this, of what we're doing here? I think mainly for the record, but.
If you just push the red button, it'll turn green.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. So it was kind of an ordeal this year with insurance. We received our renewal quote from Alaska Public Entity Insurance. And it exceeded so we have a couple of agreements that we sign when we bind insurance. One, we have what's called a cooperative participation agreement that all members of the pool has to sign. And then we also sign an agreement that provides, it's called a 3-year agreement where we commit to staying with the program for 3 years. It entitles us to a 5% discount on premium, but it has an escape clause that says if our insurance costs go up by more than 10%, you're So those penalties totaled about $135,000. So we appealed that decision. City Attorney Bloom wrote the brief, and we appealed that decision. Full disclosure, I still sit on. I'm still on the board. I obviously abstained from that proceeding, but the board granted our waiver of that penalty. We felt like the two contracts were in conflict with each other. So they granted that. So where we are now is we're looking to bind coverage. There's a resolution later in the packet to authorize binding of coverage with the Alaska Municipal League Joint Insurance Association. However, there was a couple of funds that so this was the only chance we had to get the additional funds. So that's kind of where we are, and so we'll have a new insurance provider. I do feel good about that part of the process. I think the city attorney helped me quite a bit. We did a lot of due diligence. We met with AMLJIA. We looked at their agreements. We had a number of questions and got some clarification. And I think, they're obviously a quality pool. There's only two in Alaska, and they insure a lot of public entities. So I think they'll provide good coverage for the city.
Thank you, Mr. Eubank. That was, Bernie Sanders.
I hope he's happy where we go.
Make sure we don't get overrun.
Good hard try.
Oh, no, yeah.
What's that? Yeah, so my daughter, she and her husband know in Minneapolis.
Oh, I went, yeah.
We got one up here, one in Minneapolis. Weymouth.
Oh, it's gonna save us a hundred.
48th in Chicago and Minneapolis. They're pretty, they're in Chaska, which is about 30 miles south of.
You know, I have a company a lot this summer, so I was already gonna pick up another lease, so it helps out some.
So things were getting pretty funky now.
Hey Dan, it's Jamie. I pushed a button on my black box and we lost all
like to call us back to order here. We have ordinance number 3142-2020. A motion to enact is on the floor, and we just heard from our finance director, who gave a very thorough overview of what we were doing with this. Is there any other discussion on ordinance number 3142-2020? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes?
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're now on item D8, resolution number 2020-41, approving a lease renewal of airport reserve lands between the City of Kenai and Kenai Aviation Service Incorporated, doing business as Aviation Services, for Lot 1A, Block 1, General Aviation Apron Subdivision Number 6, brought forward by administration. Councilmember Naxton.
I move for approval of Resolution 2020-41.
Second, and request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2020-41? Seeing or hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2020-41 is adopted. We're on item D9, resolution number 2020-42, authorizing the binding of insurance coverage for the city for the period of July 1, 2020 through June 30, 2021, and authorizing execution of a 3-year agreement for insurance coverage brought forward by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move for approval of Resolution 2020-42.
Second, request unanimous consent.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2020-42? Seeing or hearing none, bring it back to council. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection or any deliberation? Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, I guess, and I appreciate, Mr. Eubanks, your explanation and explaining how we got here. Do you feel if it, and this could be addressed to Paul or Terry, whoever is appropriate, that if we had the same thing happen again, like we saw a big increase, would we be able to possibly get out of this one?
Mr. Oshner?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Peterkin, I'd let Terry to respond to that. He can answer more thoroughly than I can.
Mr. Eubank.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Peterkin. The AML, Alaska Municipal League Joint Insurance Association's 3-year agreement is very similar to Alaska Public Entities. It's a little bit better because it actually doesn't put us in a position where we get bound by their cooperative participation agreement for other penalties. So this provides an out for us if their premiums increase by more than 10% a year, and releases us from all penalties. So yeah, it's just virtually functions the same way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eubank. Is there any other deliberation, comments from council? Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing or hearing none, resolution number 2020-42 is adopted. We're moving on to item D10, resolution number 2020-43, awarding a contract for janitorial service at the Kenai Municipal Airport, requested by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move to approve Resolution 2020-43.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2020-43? Seeing or hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Councilmember Naxton.
Just kind of a general question, I guess, of the city manager on bidding these type of things during the COVID deal, and it's a very public place. I was wondering how much that might be driving this, that we'd be contracting in, or is it anything that's going to would we have savings next year if everything were basically back to normal? Or does it affect it at all?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Naxted, I don't think so, and the reason I say that is because the bids that we received were highly competitive. As you know, we had new floor installed at the airport, which is going to require additional cleaning beyond what they've had to do in the past. This janitorial service, the Reborn Again, is actually the same janitorial service that we've had for the last 3 years. And their bid per month is actually lower than what it was previously. So we're seeing cost savings here, even though the scope of work on the cleaning of the facility has increased over last year.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion, deliberation of council?
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Councilmember Next said unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2020-43 is adopted. Next, we have resolution number 2020-44, authorizing a budget revision in the general fund fire department for the purchase of self-contained breathing apparatus bottles, brought forward by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move for approval of resolution 2020-44. Request unanimous consent.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2020-44? Seeing or hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2020-44 is adopted. Next, we're on item D12, resolution number 2020-45, naming the City of Kenai's wildlife viewing platform the Tar Box Wildlife Viewing Platform, brought forward by Councilmember, or Vice Mayor Malloy, rather. Pleasure, Council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to adopt resolution number 2020-45.
Second, and request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Is there any objection to unanimous consent? Or is there anybody from the general public who'd like to speak to resolution number 2020-45? Seeing or hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Is there objection to unanimous consent? Councilmember Petty.
Yes, I object to unanimous consent.
Okay, very good. We'll bring it back to the sponsor, Councilmember Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So this resolution names our wildlife viewing platform at Boat Launch Road, the Tar Box Wildlife Viewing Platform, in recognition of Kenai County Tar Box's volunteer contributions over many years to development of infrastructure and programs, creating educational and recreational opportunities for residents of and brought tourists to the city of Kenai. The project partners of the city, Kenai Watershed Forum and the U.S. Department of Interior, Kenai National Wildlife Refuge have submitted supporting letters and there's been a multiple supporting comment from members of the public from Kenai, Soldotna, Homer, Anchorage, and the lower 48. And the part of, for the public, I just wanted to read part of Kenai Watershed Forum's support letter where they indicated that the Watershed Forum coordinated with Tar Box, City of Kenai, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Fish and Game, ConocoPhillips, and Natural Resource Conservation Service in Kenai to make the idea of a wildlife viewing platform a reality in 2009. And in addition to connecting people with birds in the natural world, this project has and continues to increase public understanding of the importance of coastal areas on the Kenai Peninsula. The wildlife viewing platform itself is truly an example of citizen volunteers and government agencies working together. The idea for the platform really was the idea was brought forward by Kenai County Tar Box and who worked with Kenai Watershed Forum in 2008, 2009, who had an interest in doing a rehabilitation project in that area, and the city of Kenai supported both projects, and ConocoPhillips contributed funds to the project for construction of the platform. And since then, it's been a big draw for people to come to the area, and it was made part of the wildlife viewing trail. In the festivals that have been for the Kenai Peninsula, including the city of Kenai, it's been a site for what they call the Big Sit, where where people have come and been there for 24 hours to note all the bird species that come to the area there. There's precedent for this. For example, the city named the ball fields Steve Shearer Memorial Park. In the center of town. The footprint of this would be smaller. The idea is there would be just there could be a small sign hung from the existing sign, or the existing sign at the entrance to Lawn Road could be replaced, and there could be a plaque just on the platform itself. But this doesn't envision any change to the footprint of the project or anything over there. So I respectfully request the support of council for naming our platform at Boat Launch Road the Tarbox Wildlife Viewing Platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Malloy. Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you. I too want to thank Vice Mayor Malloy for bringing this forward, and I too will be supporting this in recognition of Ken and Connie. I'd like to even go one step further and have since all of us are here tonight, to have our names added and sign this resolution, and a copy of it be sent to the Tarbucks. If there's no objection to that, yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Petty.
Yes, I would like to thank the Tarbucks for their generous volunteer contribution, and I recognize that they have developed and put years of work into this program, and the opportunity for the economic development for our dear city. However, I would like to move to postpone to a date uncertain, so that our city could establish city codes and policies that can be developed, criteria and guidelines in the naming of public places in the city of Kenai. I know that Vice Mayor Malloy does point out a former precedence. However, I think it's been an oversight not to have criteria to be established, so that we do have guidelines on how to name public places. So I respectfully request that this be postponed until city codes and policies can be established. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Madam Clerk, do we need to have a date certain for the postponement?
I interpreted the postpone without a date certain being postponing indefinitely,
Okay.
which
So,
essentially kills it.
which would essentially kill that. So I guess my question for Councilmember Petty, and maybe involved administration, that if you were to work with administration to develop a policy, that you would bring forward a time frame to where we could establish that, and then take or postpone this particular resolution after. So
Due to my lack of understanding about how to bring this forward, I would like to request the aid of the city attorney in helping me establish the correct wording. I was thinking that there would necessitate, with this postponement, the development of the criteria through perhaps an appointed committee that would work with administration to develop city codes and policies, at which time then this could be reintroduced. So
I guess if you postpone it till like maybe the first meeting in September or end of August, we can always postpone it again.
okay.
I suppose,
So
with
with that, I would like to postpone until the first meeting in September, while guidelines and criteria could be established.
Okay, are we just changing your initial postponement?
To a date certain. Is there concurrence of the
that-
second?
And what date did you say, the first
The,
meeting?
the first meeting in September.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the postponement? Councilmember Nexon.
Yep. Well, the postponement included the why the postponement, and I was wondering what Councilwoman Member Petty would consider any different than how we're going about it in this particular case, to change a name of anything. What are you envisioning, and what might that look like other than a resolution?
No, I would not be considering a resolution. I'd be considering policies and codes in our city codes that would establish procedures with which naming of public places would have criteria and protocol and guidelines to be set forth. Many cities, let's see, have these sorts of criteria. Olympia, Washington, Mount Pleasant, Michigan, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, City Walton Manor in Florida. They have all of these in their city codes and regulations. And this is in no way disrespectful for the contributions that the tar boxes have made to the city. However, I just think it would be prudent for the city council to provide guidelines, and I did check with the city attorney, and we have no guidelines whatsoever in our city.
Any further discussion on postponement? Oh, sorry. Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you.
I gotta move this over a little bit.
I can appreciate the motion, but I'm going to speak against it. We've named trails after people that have died. I was trying to think if we've named any for someone that's living. At the school district, they've named the auditorium of Kenai Central High School after a living person. For the most part, I don't know that our policy would have to wait for somebody to die on some of these smaller ones, because it certainly doesn't stop us from renaming them at a future date. But if there was an issue or something came up, I suppose you're always dealing with something, even with somebody that died. But I would hope that we could pass this tonight, and certainly, as Councilmember Petty pointed out, if we're remiss in our code, we should clarify, or at least this council, how they want to go forward. For right now, a future council can always revisit it and change that. And that's why I say this is before us now. We voted on trails, naming trails in the past, and nobody raised the issue that, we need a policy before you can do that. So I would like to go ahead tonight, so I'll be speaking against the motion to postpone it. But I do agree with moving forward with looking into how we as a council would look at future namings. Thank you.
Any further discussion on postponement? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you. I agree with Councilmember Navarre. I think that, whatever criteria the council may come up with, I see certainly that the tar box would meet that criteria. Again, the platform would not exist except for their involvement and interest in putting together the partners to do this project, and the city's benefited greatly by it. I have no objection to adopting code that would set forth criteria, but I think that this you know, again, certainly would meet that criteria. So I hope the council would support that tonight, especially because of the interest of the people that have asked us to do this, that sent in written comment in the packet. Thank you.
Any further discussion on postponement? Councilmember Mclennan?
Yeah, I would be interested in the postponement just for the idea that it would give impetus to providing some sideboards for naming of future entities within the city. This would give us a focus point and enable us to successfully develop a cohesive plan, and then we can go forward and name the viewing station appropriately. Thank you.
Councilmember next then.
I don't think I'll be supporting this. I would like to look at any future changes to code and, you know, establishing the sideboards or whatever, but we're talking about not a building or a street. It is a viewing platform. It's pretty unique and it's small. And what I understand from what I read here, we're talking about a plaque, essentially, that names it. It's not a huge grandiose thing. It's not like naming the airport after somebody in this room or whatever, you know. I mean, like you, Jim. Yeah. Well, since you brought attention, but that I would hesitate, you know. But no slight toward you, but to a large building like that or something grandiose. But I think a lot of people do appreciate that viewing platform. It's a relatively small thing in our city that this gentleman had a lot to do with, and you know, I don't see any reason why. I'd agree with Mr. Malloy that he would meet all those criteria, whatever they might be, down the road. So I'm willing to vote no on this amendment.
Councilmember Glendinning? Oh, your mic, please. Yeah. Oh. There you go.
So the way I read this is that there would be an appetite to develop a procedure for and putting sideboards and a policy for naming of public places and entities, and that's something that could happen in due course. Do I read the
Yes.
do I read the council correctly?
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
I mean, reading the tea leaves, what I'm hearing is that the comments I've heard, they would like to not postpone and move forward with the not make them tied to one another, make up, you know, not approve the motion for postponement, but consider developing a policy, but approving this tonight on some level.
A point of order, where are we at in the procedure? Is it approving the resolution?
We're just
just the
discussing the
resolution?
motion for postponement right now.
The postponement, and the other is just a sideboard discussion about the policies and
No.
procedures.
Yes, correct. Any further discussion? Because I'd just like to weigh in on, I certainly understand Councilmember Petty's thought process about developing a policy. I think that's a good idea. You know, in some ways you look at what's going on these days and you think, well, maybe we shouldn't name any public building after anybody, just move to put a plaque there. That's a conversation for another day, I suppose. But part of what makes a city is, you know, naming buildings that were named after people who are instrumental in developing these cities in a positive way. And so I definitely get the need to maybe base some criteria on that. But as Councilmember Nax had pointed out, I don't think or foresee a policy that we would develop that Mr. Tybox wouldn't qualify under. I've known Mr. Tybox for many years and understand his involvement in the developing the interest in bird viewing, and actually beyond just the initial work to get the facility established and work towards the funding. So I will not be supporting the amendment to postpone, but would certainly encourage the other side of that to develop a policy for future criteria. So with that, any other, Councilmember Petty?
Well, I don't wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Nexted in the fact that some of the criteria that would be put in place might forego Mr. Tarbach's not being, meeting the criteria. And I graciously appreciate all of his volunteerism and his contribution to our community. But I wholeheartedly believe that there does need to be some criteria and policy created for the naming of public places, because there were many people that did make contributions into this viewing opportunity. And there just needs to be some guidelines put in place, and the postponement of this does not negate the possibility of this being named with his name on it, but I think that we should postpone. I highly recommend that this be postponed until some policies and criteria can be put in place. So I respectfully request your support.
Thank you. Any other discussion on postponement? Motion to postpone? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Nexted?
No.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
No.
Councilmember Peterkin?
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre?
No.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes?
Mayor Gabriel?
No.
Motion fails.
Next, we have a resolution 2020-45.
Excuse me, are we going to vote on that resolution?
We are right now. We did not, we just voted to not postpone. So now we're on the main resolution. Yes. So we now have resolution number 2025-45 before us. Any further discussion? Councilmember Nexted.
Yeah, so I didn't have a chance to talk about the main resolution, but I know Ken. I don't know his wife, but what I do know about Ken is that he's a very a local biologist. He's a very well respected. He's an avid birder, a mentor to many. He's spoken in front of council here regarding the birds and things like that. And I know that he takes out groups of people in our flats when we've had some of those springtime birding processes and all that. And I didn't know all the things that he had done regarding, the development of the platform out there. I just assumed that was just a Kenai thing that we did, but it didn't just happen. So I will be supporting Mr. Malloy's resolution 2020-45.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you. As I stated earlier, I'm hoping this passes unanimously and that we all sign it. I think it's important when people even visit our community and they can read about somebody and maybe even still call them up and talk to them and know, I remember the book Once Upon a Kenai that was created, and it was put together by living people. Even though they were pretty old, and I still remember Jetta Peterson and the Arnesses and that being very instrumental in making that happen, and those type of things. Over on a city clock, there's names of living people who help sponsor that clock, and whose names are up there for the residents to see and to do it. We have a lot of different naming, and for this one to run into an issue at this point, if we need a policy, but keep in mind, another council can change that policy the very next day. That's why Councilmember Glendenning, you know, at any point, any one of us can call up the administration or Scott and ask them to write us an ordinance that addresses that issue, and it'll be before this body. Whether it passes or not, it'll be up to us, or whether it gets amended. But at this time, I think it's important that we recognize the accomplishments of people that have made Kenai a better place, whether they're living and dead. And I would hope our policy, whatever it is in the future, reflects that opportunity to both recognize living and those that have died either unexpectedly or longer. So I hope that we can pass this unanimously, and at this point I would move to request unanimous consent again. Thank you.
Councilmember Petty?
Because of my convictions about the policies and procedures, not as a disrespect to the Tarbox in their contributions to the city, having a plaque or something like that, but to name the whole thing, without guidance and policies and procedures, I just can't support this. It has nothing to do with not appreciating the contributions that they have made to our community. But I do think it's wise to have those guidelines in place, and this just brings it to the forefront. And I do agree with Mr. Navarre that yes, things can change, and this is one of them that I'm trying to implement. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other discussion on resolution number 2020-45? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. And I respect Councilmember Petty's point of view, and agree that it would be good for the city to look at policies in the future, but for this particular instance, I'm encouraging council to support this tonight. And here I would just want to read from Kenai National Wildlife Refuge and other partners supporting letter. The middle paragraph talks about Mr. and Mrs. Tabak's collaboration on the development of the Alaska Wildlife Viewing Trail, the Kenai Birding Festival and Kenai Bird Club, and the building of the Wildlife Viewing Platform have not only cemented a legacy of supporting conservation of birds, but also left a lasting mark that will be utilized by many for years to come. Their efforts attracted birders to the platform from all over the country, bringing in untold dollars to the local community during shoulder times when fishing was still an upcoming event. So you know, the wildlife viewing platform was an integral part of that. It's in the Alaska Wildlife Viewing Trail publication book that they volunteered to you know, help the state implement and get out with Chambers of Commerce's help to the public, and, you know, worked with the Chamber of Commerce to refer visitors, to get visitors to come to Kenai and refer them as a place to see not only birds but other wildlife, because there's moose that come there, there's caribou, there's seals, and on occasion beluga whales. And so again, I would encourage council to support the resolution tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on resolution number 2020-45? Vice Mayor Malloy, or Councilmember Navarre?
You know, I just have to address, only because I'm hoping Councilmember Petty, so that everybody can sign this. I didn't get to go to it, but I wholeheartedly supported the borough named the assembly chambers after a living person that's still alive today. And it's because of her contributions to the community over a period. Anything could come out if you're worried about something coming out, but we're acting on knowledge that we know today and the information that's in the resolution. And that's why I say I find it very hard that any policy that this council would disregard, not allow us to recognize somebody. Now, buildings, they seem to hold that off till you die. But rooms, and that's what the borough does, and the school district. And this, as you know, is just a platform. It's not even a room in a building or a building, and yet the parameters are there. This came to us in a proper manner, and it shouldn't be held up for support. And as Councilman Petty stated, she even supports the recognition that and their contribution. And I'm just making a last-ditch effort. I'll work with her. I'll be a partner with you in the resolution, in an ordinance, to ask the city attorney to draw up a draft that for us to look at, and let's move on it. But let's move on this tonight unanimously and show respect to the people that make Kenai a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on resolution number 2020-45? Seeing or hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Petty,
No.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterkin,
Yes.
Councilmember Navarre,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
No.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat.
Yes?
Motion passes.
Thank you. We're now on item D13, resolution number 2020-46, authorizing the city manager to prepare and execute an amendment to the City of Kenai's participation agreement with the Public Employees Retirement System to remove the Recreation Center Assistant class of employees from participation effective November 1st, 2003, brought forward by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move to approve Resolution 2020-46.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2020-46? Seeing and hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Mr. Ostrander, do you want to give us a little overview on what we're doing here?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. This is actually something that came up when we were looking at the possibility of the city taking over the visitor center management, and then also the very real possibility that we're going to have to take over the Kenai Recreation Center management in the near future. As we looked at that, we started putting together a staffing plan, and most of those staffing plans involve use, in this case, of a recreation center assistant that is a 14-hour-a-week employee. And one of the reasons why we utilize 14-hour-a-week employees is that they do not participate in the PERS program. So the cost savings for them is significant. However, when you look at a staffing plan trying to fill those positions that are necessary to run a facility like the recreation center with 14-hour employees becomes cumbersome. So this would allow us the flexibility to hire folks that work 20 or 24 hours a week, giving us significant additional flexibility and keeping the costs down of running the center at the same time. So this is something that Terry Eubank pursued both for this amendment and then the next resolution, contacted the state to get this done. And it's significant in that it will allow us to operate these facilities at a much lower cost than what it would have cost otherwise.
Thank you, Mr. Ostrander. Any discussion on resolution number 2020-46? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, yeah, thank you, City Manager Ostrander. I understand a little bit more about the concept of now of staffing and how you're going to manage it and how this will give you some more flexibility. And thank you for your explanation, and I will be supporting this.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Navarre.
Thank you, Mayor. I can appreciate this. I'm just wondering, and I support it, but I guess, does our other facilities like the library have PERS part-time? I mean, are we treating these different than the others? And I guess my question is, how many others are there like that. And I don't have a problem moving in that direction if we're gonna move all the way, but I understand this. No problem. I didn't know what was happening.
Do we need to take an at ease? No? Okay.
So, anyway, I guess I have that question just to clarify. What are, the two are here, and I'm just wondering if more's to follow, or how many others are in city facilities like that.
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Navarre. So we do have additional employees, a number of employees within the city, at the library, at the senior center, that are 14-hour employees. So we do have a number of those throughout the city. The reason why it made sense to move on these right now is these are not positions that we currently have. So it's not changing something that a current employee, the benefits that a current employee receives, and taking them away. But in anticipation of needing to fill these positions, we felt that this was the appropriate time to do it. When you hire the folks, they know what the position is, they know whether it appeals to them, whether or not those PERS benefits are necessary or something that they want. So this is an opportunity to do this with both the recreation center, the janitorial staff. But in both those cases, these are not positions that we have, so getting them out of the PERS will be beneficial. And the intent isn't to pursue this with any employees that are currently PERS eligible and changing their eligibility.
Thank you. Any further discussion on resolution number 2020-45, or 46 rather? Seeing it. Councilmember Naxa.
Recommend unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2020-46 is adopted. Next, we move to item D14, resolution number 2020-47, authorizing the city manager to prepare and execute an amendment to the City of Kenai's participation agreement with the Public Employees Retirement System to remove the visitor center assistant and janitor classes of employees from participation effective July 1, 2020. Pleasure, Council Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to adopt resolution number 2020-47.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2020-47? Seeing or hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council, deliberation. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, basically the same question for City Manager Ostrander. This is the same reasoning that we currently do not have and never have had these positions filled. Am I correct?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning, we currently do not have these positions filled, other than with the exception of the janitor. Right now, we do have a janitor, but they are 14 hours, so they're not PERS eligible right now. With this, it is possible that we might modify that job description to allow them to work more hours if it's needed, but no one currently is in the visitor center assistant position or the recreation center assistant position. So those would be new positions we'd be hiring. The janitor, we are currently in the process of recruiting for janitors to clean facilities that previously were contracted out, which includes police, city hall, and library. And again, with those new hires, this would now give us the flexibility to schedule them to work regularly more than 14 hours a week, and they would not be PERS eligible. So this does give us additional flexibility in future hirings that we have not made so far.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on resolution number 2020-47?
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Navarre.
Yes, I guess maybe through the city manager to Terry Eubanks, only have him explain. I see that no termination study, I could understand by going back to 2003, but by losing July 1st, 2020, and the termination study, are we sure that that's not a requirement? And the janitor currently takes PERS or doesn't? Is that why it's July 1st? I just want to get clarification if I could.
Mr. Ostrander? Or
Well,
defer to
I'll
Mr.
carry
Eubank?
it.
Mr. Eubank?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Navarre. So, yeah, the primary difference between these two resolutions, the first one covered the recreation center class of employees, and the issue there, and the reason that's being backdated to 2003 is because in 2003 is when the city ceased operating or staffing that facility with city employees and began contracting out with the Boys and Girls Club for operations. And when I worked with the state, the tack that the state took was that in 2003, the state was not enforcing termination studies on when you opted these classes of employees out. And since we did it back then in that period of time, they thought it was okay if they, and we currently don't have any of those employees hired, that they would backdate this action to 2003 as if we did it back then, and they were comfortable doing that without creating a termination study. Regarding the visitor center, we've never staffed the visitor center with city employees. Since the day it's opened, it's been contracted out to one entity or another to staff and run that facility. And in the case of the janitor, like the city manager explained, the only janitor positions the city has ever had have been at 14 hours a week. And the threshold to be eligible for PERS, any participation in PERS, is you have to be scheduled to work 15 or more hours a week. So this really is about giving us the flex, and so therefore it's not going to create a termination study in this case. And just to clarify for council, by opting these positions out, we do have the ability to amend in the future and bring these classes of employees back into participation if we chose to. We don't have to, but we certainly could in the future if the situation warranted it or we needed to do that. So it's not tying our hands in that case. But by opting them out now, we avoid this termination study situation where it could cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars to opt positions out. So that's why we looked at doing this now to provide us the greatest amount of flexibility to staff the facilities, and knowing that we could change these tax in the future without impact to the city. So it really is a now or never type scenario.
Thank you, Mr. Eubank. Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Terry, could you talk a little bit about these employees and hours that they work and how they might be eligible for health care benefits?
Mr. Eubank?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So within our benefit package, I guess, we have a couple of thresholds. The first threshold is at 14 hours, less than 15 hours, I guess, basically, because at that point you become PERS eligible. So we have a number of positions, whether that's at the library or drivers at the senior center or the janitor at the senior center, that are 14-hour employees, and that's to stay below the PERS threshold. The second threshold that we have is at 25 hours per week, and at 25 hours per week, employees become eligible for health insurance, which is, our two biggest costs when it comes to personnel as far as fringe benefits are retirement and health insurance. So once we reach 25 hours, the employees become eligible for health insurance, and that kicks in another fringe benefit of the city. So by opting these positions out of PERS, it gives us the flexibility to schedule them to work up to 24 hours a week with minimal benefits, thus keeping the cost down. In the case we could take them up, we could make them full-time. We could have full-time recreation assistant positions. They would be health insurance eligible, but not PERS eligible by this action. So.
Thank you, Mr. Eubank. Any further discussion on resolution number 2020-47? Councilmember Peterkin.
Is this for only employees employed by us, or does it include contractors? Like if we have somebody contracted to us, can they become eligible?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Peterkin. This is only for city employees. Contractors are not PERS eligible.
Any further discussion on resolution number 2020-47?
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Malloy. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2020-47 is adopted. Next, we have resolution number 2020-48, authorizing an agreement for professional engineering services to begin development of the new master plan for the wastewater treatment facility brought forward by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move for approval of Resolution 2020-48.
I'll second that.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2020-48? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments?
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, does the city administration have anything to add other than the memo that we have here? We're on a radio show.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. I certainly can. You know, when Scott Curtin was originally hired, probably the first month that he was here, he recognized the master plan was something that was badly needed at wastewater treatment plant. It's taken some time to get a term contract in place and be able to pursue this, but as it says in the memo, the last master plan was done 16 years ago. It's overdue. I would like to bring to council's attention that this is phase one, so you can see that this has been negotiated, this first phase has been negotiated for just under $40,000. There will be additional phases after this one, but each one of those phases will be brought to the council as we move through this master plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ostrander. Any further discussion? Councilmember Glendenning?
Yeah, so there's an overarching view of what the master plan is, and then there'll just be steps along the way, milestones that will be accomplished. But we'll have some idea what the starting point and the end point is. But each step will be revealed in a timely manner and will be a logical progression. Is that what I get out of this?
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning, yes. Phase one is really just the initial assessment of the facility, working with staff and with the Public Works Director to get the initial assessment to determine what the next phases will look like and what they should be focused on. But yes, it will happen timely. Every time there's a change to the agreement, it will come back to council.
Thank you.
Councilmember Naxton.
Just kind of following up on that, the work product from the phase one, phase two, whatever, is that something that is going to be, how is that going to be shared with council? Or is that just, in your mind, just something the administration is going to be dealing with? Or you're going to share something with us, certainly.
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Naxton, I wasn't intending to provide, the phase one document to council in your packet or anything, but certainly everyone's willing to look at it. What you will get, I can assure you, is updates through Mr. Curtin's mid-month reports. He'll be providing updates as we progress through this, which will provide some detail. If council members are interested in more specific detail, and he'd be happy to go through that document with any one of you that was interested in looking at it and that.
Yeah, I don't think we need the study either, but we can ask for it. But just the updates are good, so we know where we're at and where maybe we're going. Thanks.
Any further discussion on resolution number 2020-48? Seeing none, unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2020-48 is adopted. Next, we have resolution number 2020-49, approving a conversion of the airport reserve lands described as lots 2 and 3, block 5, general aviation apron subdivision number 1, amended with SOAR International Ministries Incorporated, and approving a temporary development incentives brought forward by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
Move to approve Resolution 2020-49.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2020-49? Seeing, hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Mr. Ostrander, would you maybe give us an overview? I think this might have been something that landed under our incentives program we just passed fairly recently.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. This is an example of the incentives, the development incentives that were approved by council in Ordinance 2998, 2018, so back in 2018. So this is for airport reserve lands, and what SOAR is proposing to do is actually behind what is the sewing shop now, is to build a hangar in that area. The development incentives that you see here, the process that we went through is we got an estimate from SOAR on what the cost of those improvements would be, which are permanent improvements, that grubbing, backfill, excavation, that sort of thing, permanent improvements to the property that will go with it and the city will own in perpetuity. They provided us an estimate of what those would be, and then they actually hired an engineer to look at the scope of work and provide their estimate of what it was. SOAR's estimate was $140,000. I believe the engineer's estimate was $136,000 something. So they provide an estimate. We confirm that it is an estimate that's accurate, so they will qualify for the lease payment credits for the full 5-year period based on the $140,000 worth of improvement.
Thank you, Mayor.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Hey, I'm just really pleased to see the incentive program having an effect in promoting development in the airport. So I'm happy to support this resolution.
Councilmember Naxton.
Yeah, I'm happy to support it also, and I noticed that the clearing and grubbing appears to be completed there. There's a big opening where there was a bunch of aspen trees, and so I look forward to a hangar there at some point.
Thank you. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes, I'm echo chamber today, I guess, but this definitely gives confirmation to the improvement package that we did develop in association with these leases, and I'm glad to see the improvements in the airport and along that road, and I welcome the addition.
Thank you. Any other discussion on resolution number 2020-49?
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Councilmember Naxted. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2020-49 is adopted. Next, we have resolution number 2020-50, authorizing the city manager to execute an in-kind memorandum of understanding with Department of Army for design work prior to execution of a design agreement for the Kenai Bluff stabilization project brought forward by administration. Pleasure,
Mayor.
council. Oh,
I'd move at this time enthusiastically resolution number 2020-50 and request unanimous consent.
Second.
thank you, Councilmember Navarre. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2020-50? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, I too am enthusiastic about this at long last, but because we have been waiting so long, maybe we could just hold in suspense a while longer, and we do have a radio show if our city manager could illustrate for those in the public exactly what this means to us.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendenning. Yeah, so after 3.5 years on the job, we are this close to finally actually doing something on the ground. What this 221 agreement will do is it allows the city to start working on design work in support of what we anticipate will be a final design agreement with the Corps, hopefully in November of this year. So rather than waiting for the agreement to be signed in November, this gives us the ability to start the design right now. Once that design agreement is signed, then it will expedite that significantly. And I also anticipate that because the city will be directly managing these efforts this summer and into the fall, that the costs associated with this will be less than what it was if it were under the Corps' PED agreement. Preliminary discussions with the Corps indicate that there's a lot of work that we can do here. We can certainly do surveying, we can certainly do geotechnical work. It's likely that we can actually begin designing the project to some extent. This is going to require a lot of diligence on our part in working with the Corps to make sure that whatever we do is done in a way that it's going to be fully reimbursable when we do get the PED agreement signed. So that's going to be critical, that as we work through this, that we make sure every step of the way that what we're doing is the way that the Corps is going to accept when we get to the PED. With that being said, I'm confident that the work we will do will be reimbursable, primarily because oftentimes when you look at the Corps and the scope of the work that they do on a project, it far exceeds what you would typically see in an engineered project. So, but again, we will be working very closely with the Alaska District. I had a great conversation with them right when we received this. Basically them telling us that, yes, you're on the hook for this if you screw something up, but we're going to be with you there, helping you out, make sure that the work that you do is going to be reimbursable at the end.
Councilmember Glendenning?
So, question, this will more likely fulfill the definition of shovel-ready.
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning. When I think of shovel-ready, I typically think that, you know, the design is done, we can put it out on the street, ready to bid. So I wouldn't necessarily call this shovel-ready, but it's getting us a lot closer to shovel-ready than we were at any time in the past.
Yeah, Councilor Navarre's enthusiasm is boiling over here, so I'm all for this. But thank you for your explanation and illustration.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarre, and then
Thank you. I want to show my enthusiasm by requesting that the clerk provide everybody's name to be signed on this resolution, even though it only goes to the city manager. To me, this is a milestone, and it should be recognized. And so I hope there is unanimous consent on this resolution. And I personally tonight would like to sign my name to this resolution. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you. Yeah, I have no objection to signing my name to this resolution because I agree with Councilmember Navarre totally, but do have a question for the city manager as far as to how the in-kind works. So is it that whatever the cost to the city is of doing this work, you know, surveys and everything, if any, it's going to be credited towards our 35% share of the project cost if it's approved? Is that basically how that would work?
Yes.
Yeah, that was, I had the exact same question, because you said reimbursed,
Yeah, so.
and I was just the same thing.
In kind and reimbursable was sort of,
Yep.
you know, so I just wanted to make sure I understood how
Yeah.
it worked. We wouldn't actually get money, but we would have it would count towards our 35% of project cost.
Mr. Ostrander?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Vice Mayor Malloy. Yes, reimbursable is probably the wrong term. In-kind is exactly what would be. So as we move through this, if the surveying costs $100,000 and the geotechnical costs $250,000, that would be $350,000, whatever our costs that we incurred that would be used to match our 35% of the project agreement.
Very good. Councilmember next then.
I was wondering, from the city manager, we get reports from you because, you're talking to these people and we're moving forward and all of that, but who's actually going to be the project manager? Would it be you? And then, you have to have what you need to have done, and then you would have your public works director do everything for the surveyor or whatever. But who's going to be the overall manager of this portion of the work?
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Nackstead, Scott Curtin, Public Works Director, will be the project manager on this project, but because I have been the essentially the project lead since I've been here. I'll still be involved in it to quite a large extent, I'm sure. But when it comes to putting together the RFP or managing the contractors, that will be Mr. Curtin that will be doing that.
And that's kind of what I meant. That gives me some comfort because of the degree of involvement you've had up to this point. So,
Councilmember Petty?
Yes, I enthusiastically and wholeheartedly am very thankful for the progress and where we are currently. And if our news media in newspaper or radio form are out there in radio land, our media form, I would love to see this on the front page in the progress that's been made that's going to be a greatly beneficial opportunity for our city. So thank you for everyone's hard work currently and in the past. I know that there's a lot of people who have participated this in the past for many, many, many years ago. And I hope that if they're listening to this, that they too will celebrate, and we thank them for their efforts in this long journey.
Councilmember Navarre?
Thank you. Just a further clarification on in-kind. Besides the money that we do in-kind, will Terry be accounting time different for you and Scott on it? And is that allowed in-kind? Because the project would have incurred those kind if they would have done it. Are those allowable in-kind costs, and are you going to track those or attempt to?
Mr. Osterheimer?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Navarre, those are allowable costs, administrative costs, and Scott Curtin tracks his administrative costs all the time on his time and effort. I have not tracked mine from the beginning on this. As we enter this 221 MOU, I will start tracking my costs associated with this administration, but most of the heavy lifting, I hope, that when we get to the actual project part of it, is going to be with Mr. Curtin, and he will be tracking those administrative costs.
And if it's possible in the negotiations and writing the agreement, if there could be some consideration for the 30 to 50 years of people's input as in kind. No, I understand. The city's been gone a long way, and I'm glad we're really there. This project, I believe, now there's nothing that can stop it practically. And I'm enthusiastically, I don't think, I'm like Councilmember Petty. I hope there's a news story about this. I hope we even put it on our website and thank the people through all the years that got us to where we are today, and that their dream to protect the city of Kenai and protect its economic viability, its cultural heritage, is amazing that we're finally here today. And realistically, if by this speeding it up, and I believe Congress will continue to fund the Corps of Engineers, and this project will be funded because of that, that we could be under construction no later than 2023, but I believe it could happen in 2022. I would hope it could happen in 2021, but I'll be a little bit cautious. But anyway, I'll end my comments there so that we can vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Yeah, I'd just like to chime in and thank the city manager for his diligence through working through this process. And it's, again, like pushing a boulder uphill. Even though we wanted at the toe of the bluff, it seems like we've been pushing it uphill for a long time, and certainly appreciate everybody's work on this in prior administrations and prior elected officials, because it does seem like it is getting closer to fruition. So again, thank you, and I would be happy to sign on as I do sign this because I will, but I hope everybody else will too. So yeah, doubly happy. Maybe I'll sign twice. And with that, I think there was unanimous consent request, is that correct? Is there any objection to unanimous consent? I didn't think so. Seeing that, resolution number 2020-50 is adopted. Next, we have, yeah.
I truly believe.
Next up, we have resolution number 2020-30, recommending the Kenai Peninsula.
Mayor?
Oh, yes. Oh, let's take a 10-minute at ease here before we move on. Thank you, Councilmember
Sorry
Naxton.
about that.
No worries. We are now on unfinished business. Item 1, resolution number 2020-30, recommending the Kenai Peninsula Borough Assembly enact ordinance number 2020-24, which would provide for vote by mail elections, more time between a regular election and runoff election, and removal of proposition statements. This was brought forward by Councilmember Peterkin, and this clerk's note. At the May 20th meeting, this item was postponed to this council meeting. A motion to adopt is on the floor. And before we get on, since this is already on the floor, Madam Clerk, could you give us an overview of what happened last night at the Borough Assembly meeting?
Sure, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. The Assembly failed the motion to reconsider. So they did not reconsider enactment of the ordinance. It is still enacted.
Correct.
To go into effect January 1, 2021.
Correct. Very good. That's what I thought happened. So, Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, I'd like to postpone this indefinitely.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Very
Request
good.
unanimous consent.
Very good. Is there any, we've already had our public hearing on this, so we don't have to open it up for that, do we? No, okay. Unanimous consent was requested. There's an objection to postponement indefinitely, which essentially kills this resolution. Seeing none, that motion is approved, and resolution number 2020-30 is not adopted. That brings us to item G11, action approval, lease assignment of Lot 3, Block 4, General Aviation Apron from Dwayne Benton to Joel Caldwell. This is brought forward by administration. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move that we approve the lease reassignment from Dwayne Benton to Joe Caldwell.
Second, request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection to that? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, is there any backstory on this?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. This is just an assignment between these two individuals. Use is not going to change, still aircraft storage and maintenance. There are a number of previous leaseholders that are in the memo, Russ Winger, John Eimel, and Eric Barnes. Been with Dwayne Benton since 2012.
Yeah, I used to work for John Eimel in the early 70s, so this goes back a long way. Thank you for your update.
Thank you, Mr. Ostrander. Is there any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, the lease assignment of Lot 3, Block 4, General Aviation Apron from Dwayne Benton to Joel Caldwell is approved. Next up, we have discussion, city response to COVID-19. That's brought forward by the city manager, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So to update the council on what's been happening with COVID-19 at the city, update on some of the facilities. The rec center still plans for an opening on July 1st. Library has been in a partial opening since June 1st. That's been going really well. Right now, the plan is to increase the opening of the library on June 22nd to allow folks in to browse. So it's going to be very similar to what it was before it was shut down. However, they're going to set time limits on the amount of time that people can browse. So it's basically a grab and go, get in, get out. And there's also going to be capacity limits on the library itself. City Hall, we're likely going to go to the next reopening phase, which is essentially going to be unlocking the doors of City Hall, likely early next week, Monday. We would still recommend that people make reservations to come in, but rather than hearing the doorbell ring all day long, we're just going to open the door now and people can come in. We generally don't see more than one or maybe two people at a time, so we feel comfortable going to that phase. Visitor Center is still open. Senior Center is still closed. We do have 2 furloughed employees that were at the library. These are the 14-hour employees we talked about earlier tonight that returned to work this week on Monday. We've got 2 remaining furloughed employees that are at the Senior Center that we think planning to return on July 1st. So as of July 1st, hopefully, we'll have all employees, including our 14 hours, back at work at the city. One of the things I want to talk to council briefly about is we've been working on our return to work for folks that are traveling out of state. You know, there's the recent mandate. Councilmember Navarre was working through that mandate recently with his travels to the lower 48. The mandate, to summarize the mandate, it really doesn't matter if you've been gone for 5 days or if you are traveling and you get a test before you leave or once you arrive in Anchorage. What it amounts to is you need to get one test that's negative, and then you need to have a follow-up test that's negative. After your first negative test, before your first negative test, you have to quarantine. So we've told employees, before you get that first negative test, you can't come to work, you have to quarantine at home. After you get that positive, then you can go to work, but you have to minimize interactions. So for some folks that are working at the city, that likely means that they're not going to be able to minimize interactions, so they're going to have to continue to take leave until they get their second negative test. For employees that are able to telework or able to isolate sufficiently at work, they're going to be given the opportunity to come back into work during that minimize interaction phase until they get that second negative test. Once they get the second negative test, then they'll be able to return to work as normal, the way the rest of us are. This is relevant to me because I am going to be traveling after the next council meeting. I'm going to be traveling down south, so I'm going to be going through this process. We've got a number, not a significant number, but a number of employees that are planning to travel for certain reasons down south. And so we put this in place now, and we think it's the best balance between allowing folks to travel if they need to, and also protecting their coworkers when they come back to work. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Could we get just a brief update on the status of the CARES grant program that we've been, that we put out, please?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I had that under
Yeah,
the
I was
city
going to say that
manager's
might have
report.
been under the manager's report. This works on G2.
If you want to do it later, you know. I
Yeah,
thought it was
let's roll through
COVID.
that on the city manager's report, and if you want to just pick that off, and then we'll, that's acceptable.
Well, could I just say then that, you know, I've had some positive feedback about it from businesses in the community, so looking forward to hear what your comments are. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions of the city manager regarding city response to COVID-19? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, G13, which was added to the laydown, a memo requesting to amend something previously adopted. Do I have a council member that'd be willing to make this amendment? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Looking at the laydown, I would move to amend previously adopted legislation, Resolution 2020-22, by amending the year 2021 in the second paragraph of Section 4 to 2020.
Second, request unanimous consent.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, amendment to resolution number 2020-22 is adopted. Next, we'll move to commission committee reports. Council on Aging. Ms. Petty. Council on, oh, I'm sorry. You're usually there. I'm just, okay.
Yeah, no,
Councilmember,
I'm the old guy. July,
sorry,
July 9th
Councilmember,
is the next
Councilmember
scheduled one.
Glendenning.
Stay tuned.
Maybe I'm losing it here. Councilmember Glendenning.
July 9th, next meeting, maybe.
Thank you. Airport Commission. Mr. Councilmember Naxton.
I covered that for Mr. Navarre. The Airport Commission met on June 11th. They met here in the chambers and virtually, so it was, you know, one of those hybrid things. Under their new business, they had discussion regarding the first item was award of the janitorial contract. There were 4 bids. We saw that this evening, and that starts effective July 1st. Then they had a discussion recommendation for lease renewal for airport lands, basically for a 4-year contract for Crowley Fuels, continuing that. They had it, and they approved that. They discussed and recommended a lease assignment that we talked about this evening between, reassignment between Dwayne Benton and Joe Caldwell. They discussed and recommended approving a 10-year lease at the UPS building for that property. And we discussed also this evening. They discussed and recommended a special use permit for Alaska Fuel for aircraft loading and parking. Basically, that's some apron space up near the tower. The action approval item, they ratified the commission's decision regarding future in-person and virtual meetings. They're wanting to continue, in person as much as they can. And proceeding with that. And they had a lay down. They recommended, oh yes, we discussed this this evening also. Recommended the conversion of the airport reserve lands described as Lot 2, Block 3 as a SOAR property, to the newer contract. And their next meeting, is July 9th.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxted. Harbor Commission.
Yeah,
Councilmember Peterson.
thank you, Mayor Gabriel. We actually met in person, which was nice, and had a good meeting. There's a couple things. We talked a lot about dip netting, and we're basically thinking it's going to go at this point. We're not, it's up to the state, but we're best we know, we're preparing for it to go. Scott is, and the fee shacks are getting ready. I think the ones over on the south side are ready to go, and they're getting them to where we can use the card readers and minimal interaction with our employees anyway. So that's moving along nice. Peninsula Avenue Bluff stabilization is out on the street for bid right now. The dock repairs are gonna be bid out soon. Did you have something comment on that, Jim? Or?
Not the dock repairs,
Oh,
but the Cannery's boat launch. I can talk to that if
Okay,
I need.
yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, there was a disapproval for a repair and replace and renewal of a boat launch that had been used by Pacific Star, and it was denied by the River Center, and it came before the Planning Commission at the Borough, and through the intervention of our city manager and our city attorney, 10 findings came up in support of the repair and renewal of that critical boat launch, and the findings of the River Center were reversed 10-0 on a unanimous vote at the Planning Commission. So just thank you guys very much for helping keep our fishing industry alive, and I think this was a teachable moment for all, and I think in the future we'll perhaps have better definition on what our waterfront is about, and I know that's in the works, and that ends my little bit of observation. Thank you.
Yeah, EJ and Seafoods and Packstar really meant a lot to them, getting the repairs done there. We did talk about, our next meeting isn't until August 10th, but I did advise them that DipNet money that we have is still out there available for upgrades to dip netting, so to recommend that I encourage them to recommend something to us for how to best spend that money. Hopefully they'll come up with something, and again, our next meeting's August 10th, and we're going to meet in person at this point unless numbers change. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Peterkin. Parks and Recreation Commission.
There's, was no meeting in June, no report.
Thank you. Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you. Planning and zoning met on June 10th. They started out reviewing a couple of preliminary plats. The first plat was Holland Park Spur Highway Subdivision 2020 edition. It's about a 6.5 acre parcel located just north of the Spur Highway. It's located specifically as you're leaving Kenai proper and into the new 4-lane area there. On the left, the contractor has kind of a cleared area where he's parked equipment and all of that. It's generally that area. And it's a simple subdivision where he's dividing that one parcel into two halves. It's kind of long and skinny, relatively, about 200 feet deep and about a 1/4 mile long. And that was recommended for approval with some minor modifications. The second plat was that they recommended for approval was Mclennan Estates Edition Number 1, and this is located actually close to that area, slightly this way, along Davidson Street, and it's a re-subdivision of an existing subdivision where there was 2 houses on one parcel owned by the same individual, and they created a lot line in between those 2 parcels, and then subdivided out moved a lot line, and that was recommended. 3 parcels containing about 2.5, 0.9, and 1.6 acres. And then on the public hearings, they had a resolution for a rezone, so that's something we're going to see coming back like we did this evening. And that takes us back to along the Spur Highway, that long, thin parcel that I described in some detail that was approved recommended for a rezone from rural residential to general commercial. So we'll probably see that in about a month's time. And then under new business, they requested to rename Pelchy Drive to Pelch Drive. Pelchy Drive is on Beaver Loop. Mike Pelch homesteaded through there before Beaver Loop was built through his homestead, and I don't know how the name Pelchy Drive, didn't know him as Pelchy, but anyway, his son or grandson requested that change, and it was recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission to do so. And they also authorized the city planner to send a letter to the Kenai Peninsula Borough supporting a 1-year time extension to finalize the plat of Keys Turn subdivision. Keys Turn subdivision is located basically across the highway from the mortuary on the other side of Beaver Creek. Go up the hill. It's on the left, back in there. The preliminary plat.
Dogwood Avenue?
I think it might be Dogwood, okay. Yeah. So it's on the west side of Dogwood, and then perhaps down to Beaver Creek or over the bluff there a little. But that plat was, I think it was approved in 2013. So it's been kind of extended for the last 7 years. So they approved a 1-year time extension at the request of the borough planner. And they reviewed an application for a 10-year lease renewal for city-owned land within the airport reserve. What was the UPS property once again? So that's the 3rd time we've heard that this evening. Then they had an add-on item. They voted to continue to proceed with the in-person type meetings like we're having now, or with the Zoom, and they seemed to be happy with that solution. And that is the end of my report. Their next meeting is June 24th.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next, the Beautification Committee.
Yes, thank you. There was no meeting, but I'd like to publicly thank all of the volunteers who came out to plant flowers for the city for the beautification opportunity. And our next meeting will be in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Petty. Next up is Mini Grant Steering Committee, which there is no report. Under report of the mayor, You know, there's not been a lot going on, which is a bummer, you know, beyond, you know, where we are kind of sort of coming back to normal to some degree. And one of the things I wanted to just mention is that, you know, I think we all feel a little bit frustrated at the fact that, you know, I don't say frustrated because I don't mean this in any way against anybody, but the fact that we just aren't we're having the 4th of July parade this year, which is something that's been very important to the city for many, many years. And over the last several years, it just seemed like, I don't know if it was the weather or not, but attendance just seemed to keep going up and up and up. And last year was a wonderful event. We had a ton of people on the park strip, and yeah, it's just it's just frustrating. I think we all feel that, and I just wanted to point that out to the people out there that you know, this wasn't anything we took lightly. I think it was something that you know, the health of the community was important, and there was discussion about possibly changing the parade route and doing other things. I know the you know, the park strip after the parade is a big event, probably more exciting for a lot of people than the parade itself because of the you know, the live music and the different vendors, and chance for people campaigning for office can set up a booth and people can get to know them a little bit better. So, you know, I certainly hope that we have it next year. I mean, this is clearly, you know, something that we want to make sure we get back next year and do whatever we can in our power to do that. That being said, I certainly hope that everybody, you know, celebrates our country's birthday. You know, the fact that we're not having a parade doesn't necessarily mean we need to ignore the fact that we are, you know, that is our country's birthday, and this is still, in my opinion, the greatest country on earth to live in, because of what we can do as collectively, I think, is what makes us strong. And I think at times like this, we need to sort of step back and even look at what's going around, and what collectively the strength we have and the good what we do together. So, you know, I think at times like this, that's the second frustrating part, is that number one, we canceled it because of COVID, but number two, at a time like this is probably the most important time that we should have that, and you know, understand why, you know, we live in this country, and bring in our kids to the parade so that they can, you know, develop a sense of patriotism and love of their country early on. So anyway, I just wanted to get that out there. I think it needed to be said, because there's a lot of other folks in the community that I think were disappointed to not see it go on. And I think there's even been talk of Nikiski is maybe looking at putting one on locally there, a small one, and maybe something that's a lot. But regardless, I don't know, maybe I could encourage folks to have one in their neighborhoods, you know, and I think you could probably get by with doing something simple without having to providing, you know, traffic control through a block of woodland or something like that. So, you know, just food for thought. And with that, I'll turn my seat over to the administration reports and move to the city manager, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Actually, on Friday, the 5th of June, I met with Annette Villa over at her new market in Old Town. And if you guys haven't had a chance to go over there and check it out, really exciting what she's done. It's where the old post office is, just next to the backside of Paradisos. She's cleared out an area there, so it's Friday, Saturday market. She's got live music. She's got vendors there. I visited with her that morning. Actually, she gave me a tour of the old post office building and what she started doing in there. She's incredibly excited. She's the same person that has grown the Wednesday market from what it was 6, 7 years ago when there was 5 vendors at the Wednesday market in Soldotna to last year, I think there was 120 vendors. She's got a great vision for this property in Old Town too, and I fully anticipate that it's going to grow as well. And I'd encourage anybody who hasn't been there to check it out. It's pretty neat right now. I also wanted to mention that as you went through the packet today, I hope you recognized that there was 17 pieces of new legislation in the packet. So it was a tremendous effort on the part of all staff to put that together. But I want to say specifically, I think Terry Eubank might have set the record for the number of pieces of legislation drafted in one meeting. He had 7 pieces of legislation that he drafted himself. And then actually in the laydown, there's another one. So really 8. But, you know, the thing is, I want to point out, it's not only about quantity, but the quality, particularly of some of the pieces of legislation that he brought forward tonight, was excellent. The 2 where we were able to get those positions out of PERS benefited, that's significant for the benefits that provides to the city going forward. So I want to commend him for that. And then when you look at the insurance renewal of the city, the work that he did and Scott did on that, to save the city over $100,000 this year wasn't an easy effort, but I just want to point that out. Not only was there a significant amount of quantity that he provided, but the quality of the legislation was excellent too. So I do want to talk about CARES Act funding now to give you an update. So as of 4:30 today, we had a total of 139 applications for the program. We've got 2 days left in the program. We're seeing 15-ish applications a day, so I would expect that through Friday, we may get as high as even 160 or 180 applications. Out of those, we have 115 businesses and 24 nonprofits that have applied. The total possible funding, if everyone qualified to the level that they applied for, right now is $1.42 million. So I'm guessing that's going to approach $2 million by the time we're done Friday. Depends on how many people have been procrastinating or going to get their applications in at the last minute. I do want to say that we hope to have an ordinance for the council to consider at your next meeting that would look to put together a program for the individual assistance portion of this. That would be for introduction on July 1st. I also want to have an executive session at the next meeting to talk about what we've called the Resiliency Bucket, which is the bucket where many of the capital projects would potentially come out of. I'd like to have an executive session with council at the next meeting to talk about that, talk about some of the things that we're considering going forward with that. So hopefully we'll be able to set up an executive session at the next meeting to talk to council about that bucket specifically. So when we look back at the program we've got now, we've got 1.4 million that looks like it's going to go out the door, potentially as much as 2 million. We're going to have $1 million or more left in that bucket. Now, at the last meeting, Councilmember Navarre made a motion that if there's leftover money, then that would be applied to small businesses in a prorated amount to all of those small businesses. I know personally I wasn't expecting to have as much as 1.1 or 1.2 million left over in that. But I also recognize that the council feels very strongly that any remaining money should go to small businesses and not to the nonprofit side. What I would like to do, because it does look like a significant amount, and because after internal discussions about this, we are concerned about the fact that if we were to just apply that to those businesses, in essence, give them more than what they applied for and do it on a prorated amount, particularly with the significant amount of money that we're talking about, that we could start getting to a point where we might be violating some of the federal guidance with those CARES Act monies. So what I would propose to do instead is when we finish with this grant program, we've looked at all the applications, we've determined who's eligible. Middle of next week, cut those checks at the amounts that were included in the original guidance that administration provided, and then take whatever remaining amount left over and actually go through a second grant program. That second grant program would allow people that have applied already to apply again. So if they have additional needs beyond what they said, they could apply again, or if there's someone who missed it the first time, they could apply. This would require a resolution at the next meeting of council on July 1st, basically to modify that motion that Councilmember Navarre made at the last meeting. And again, I think the reason why this is important is because as we go through this, we need to be really diligent about not violating any of the federal guidance. If we do, there is a chance when we're audited that we could be required to pay this money back. And at that point, we won't have the money any longer. So we need to be very careful about going forward. And I think as we discuss this, as Scott and I discussed this today, we do have some concerns that if we were to apply that money as was directed by council in that motion at the last meeting, that we could run into trouble. This will still allow all of that money to go to businesses. Nonprofits would not be allowed to apply during this. So again, only small businesses would be able to apply. And if there is identified need by these folks that have already applied once, they could apply again. So that's going to be my approach and my recommendation to council. If I come to council with that resolution on July 1st and council says, no, we don't want to do that, we want to go with the way that we approved it based on Councilmember Navarre's motion, then we would go ahead and distribute that prorated to those businesses that had applied during that first round. But this will give council an opportunity to look at that again and make the decision whether or not they agree with the administration that we could go with the second program, or we should go with the original motion as Mr. Navarre stated at the last meeting. The last thing I wanted to talk about is something that I've been working on. Actually, our entire team has been working on over the last week to 10 days or so, and that is in regards to the Borough CARES Act funding. So the Borough received $37 million in CARES Act funding. The cities received smaller amounts, obviously. The indications are that the borough's funding was based on economic activity not only in non-city areas, but the entire borough itself. So the businesses within our community contributed to the amount that the borough got. So they would not have gotten the full $37 million if you didn't include the economic activity in Soldotna and Kenai and Homer and Seward and Kachemak City and Soldovia. So that likely generated somewhere between 14 and 16 million additional dollars that went to the borough. Unfortunately, the boroughs, as a second-class borough, doesn't have the power under their executive development or economic development powers to offer their grant program to businesses within the city. So we've been trying to work with the borough administration to figure out a way that it can apply so that businesses within the city of Kenai and the other cities within the borough can utilize those funds. I think we maybe have found a solution, but there's still work to be done. It's definitely worth pursuing. It likely means an additional $2 to $3 million that would be available for City of Kenai businesses alone. So just wanted to let council know that we're working on that. I'm hopeful that we can get a resolution with the borough administration, and then our businesses within the city would be able to apply for that. And the comparison that I use is a bar restaurant that sits in the city of Kenai right now under our grant program can only get $10,000. The way the borough program is being put together right now, that same business would likely be eligible for $30,000. So they could be across the street from one another, one in the city of Kenai, one outside the city of Kenai, both paying borough taxes, but the one in the city would only be eligible for the $10,000. The one outside the city would be eligible for $30,000. We have to figure out a way that we can make this equitable, where we're treating all businesses across the borough equally, regardless of whether or not they're inside or outside a city. So that's all I got, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, I was just curious. I'm glad to hear the report, because I was very interested, like Bob, to see what the response would be. Frankly, I thought it would be higher. But could you give an example of what sort of violation, like, because if there was $1.4 million going out, or how many's going to go out to businesses, if you roughly, like?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Peterkin. Right now, we've got 1.4 million going out to businesses and nonprofits. There'll be potentially more that are gonna be applied for in the next couple days. So say we get to 2 million, there's gonna be $1 million additional dollars that would be available to go out to small businesses.
So my question was then, so say there's $1 million left over, and we were kind of breaking it up like we didn't really do it, but we were thinking like 2 million for businesses and like $1 million for nonprofits or something, and nonprofits could get up to 50,000, and like you just earlier said, businesses could get up to 10,000. Well, if we gave another $1 million out, then wouldn't businesses get like up to 20,000 or something? I mean, I don't understand how we would violate a rule or something. Maybe an example of how we would violate.
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Peterkin, and Scott may wanna, he's still back there, he is. He may wanna chime in too. So when they applied for these grant funds, we required them to self-certify that said, one, that they've been impacted by COVID-19, and two, that they need this assistance. And that self-certification is telling us that yes, let's say, for example, they had enough gross sales to qualify for the $10,000 grant. They're saying, yes, we were impacted by COVID, we need the assistance at this level, so $10,000 level. If we then turn around and just give them an additional $10,000, we haven't gotten them to self-certify that not only were they impacted, but they need that level of assistance. So we really need them to self-certify again to say, yep, you gave me 10,000 before, but I'm still impacted, and I do need this additional 10,000. The federal guidance is clear in that they need to have been impacted, and they need that money to offset those impacts to COVID. So getting them to self-certify a second time, we feel is important to make sure that we follow that federal guidance. And again, I don't know if Scott has anything to add.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I appreciate your report on that, Mr. Ostrander, and I'm happy to, look forward to seeing a second program. But I also know that, like, for example, today, a bookkeeping tax preparer business just contacted me and said, where do I find the information? And I want to tell my clients about this, and so I sent the person the link, to the website, the city, where you can find all that information. So it's like the word was going out, but people are just starting to hear it too. So you may be correct that in the next couple of days you'll get a bunch more applications, and I think there still is the need out there, and people it's from the announcement to hearing it and to acting on it may take a little while. So I'm confident that the need is out there, and for some of these businesses that have already received some money, I'm confident that they may have been harmed to the level where another 10,000 will really help them if they reapply again. But there's businesses out there that are just still finding out about it and haven't applied yet.
Councilmember Navarre?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah. I was on a Zoom meeting with City Manager Ostrander and that AML put together for our legislative, state legislative delegation on, and I got Paul shared with them some of the early results of the application of how that, and I said to myself, boy, that isn't, I'm like Robert, I thought we'd have more response. And so unbeknownst to me that they looked at the issue, I did call him up and say, maybe we need to make an amendment to my motion if it's not clear, because the intent wasn't to not allow small businesses in our community to be able to apply. But I did ask him, I said, if we make a change, make sure the ones that already did apply can apply again, because that was part of our intent of if they need it. Because Councilman Peterkin's concern was there wasn't equal funds and some of that. So I do agree with the city manager that it's cleaner if you go out and, as Councilman Vice Mayor Malloy stated, any small businesses that might miss the 19th deadline, they too will have an opportunity. They won't have an opportunity to get two, but they'll have an opportunity to apply. And I think, and I'll certainly let Councilman Peterkin speak for himself, but I think that's still what city manager's talking about is the spirit of the motion as it was happening that night, and what the intent was is to help out small businesses with whatever's left over. And the fact that you go out for another program, I think, just makes it clearer, and also maybe moves the goalposts a little bit for somebody that might have missed this opportunity at the beginning. So I look forward to that resolution and that clarification at next meeting, and support your actions of getting checks out on the 23rd based on the initial response and the dollars associated with that application. Thank you.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes, a question for City Manager Ostrander. We had talked about the borough and the overlapping potential for funds going from borough money and city money to a business that would qualify as being bidirectional. Does this apply to nonprofits also? There are many nonprofits that are either based in town or out in the borough that service willingly those people, not only in Kenai but Soldotna and perhaps other entities. Is that matrix being looked at and considered also in the same spirit as the businesses?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendenning. So just to be sure I understand your question, so as far as pursuing a mechanism where the borough could provide a grant program to businesses within the city, are we also pursuing a mechanism that the borough program could apply for nonprofits within the city? Is that the question?
Right, because typically a nonprofit just doesn't dedicate itself to Kenai only or Soldotna only. It involves itself throughout the borough. It just happens to have an address here. So is that follow through? Is that thought being pursued on a parallel path with businesses and nonprofits?
Yeah.
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendenning. It is being pursued, and I think that the borough program, although it hasn't been fully developed yet, will likely be similar to our nonprofit program, which did not require physical location in the city of Kenai. It required that those nonprofits provide services within the city. So, and again, the borough program has not been fully developed, but if it is developed similarly to ours, in that case, you could have a nonprofit that's located physically within the city of Kenai that's providing services outside the city that they could apply for the grant program. So I'm anticipating that's going to be how that's going to shake out with them, and I hope it will.
Yeah, I listened in on the meeting last night. They went till midnight, and I could see that we're a couple steps ahead of perhaps other organizations in how to adjudicate this COVID money. So I think your leadership and fine example probably will carry the day. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Naxton?
Yeah, just kind of carrying on the original thought. I would support looking at your resolution you were referring to, and frankly, when I agreed with the amendment that Mr. Navarre made, I didn't think there'd be much left over to begin with. So it was either there wouldn't be any or it wouldn't be a whole lot. So it just seemed like a convenient way to deal with a smaller amount. So we may not be there. So yeah, and kind of recognized at the time that we might have to regroup too, like we're talking now. And then along the lines of what the borough has and with the city of Kenai and the other cities, I think one of the first things that we got from administration was, perhaps it came from the state of Alaska, just what the funds can be used for, how they can be transferred, and it was a 30,000-foot view to some degree, but it did appear that government entities could take funds and share them with other entities, and it seems like that if that is the case, then could be an equitable way for the borough to share with the different cities within the borough to handle that if they're so willing. And I'm not sure if that is the tack that you're looking to with the borough.
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Naxted. At this point, I believe it's the legal opinion of the borough that they don't have the power to transfer the money from the borough to the city either. So the approach that we're looking at least preliminarily right now, is a temporary transfer of economic development powers from the city to the borough to allow them to then prop up their grant program in the city limits. That would require an ordinance be passed by the council and also by the assembly. So there's some steps that need to be taken, but at this point, that looks like potentially the most viable option to make it happen.
Any other questions of the city manager? See none.
I could.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Councilmember.
That's okay. I was waiting because we've been talking about this. I did have another item.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up Beaver Loop, and Mr. Ostrander and I talked about it a little today, and that, it's recently paved, and when any project is paved and it's black and then you put lines on it and all that, it's as good as it's probably going to look, and it does look really good, with the road and the bike path, and there's seating and there's grass growing, and luminaires are ways out, and things aren't quite done, but it's getting close. And I did have an unexpected meeting with a discussion with the contractor's superintendent and today, and he was a little agitated about other things, but he kind of alluded to the least that maybe the project hasn't necessarily gone so well, that there was some elevation busts throughout the project. And what I was looking at, frankly, today was some asphalt that had been laid down, perhaps too cold or something, and they were going to cut it out, but I just saw that, and I was just sort of, I'm an engineer, it's what I do. I was taking a photo of it, but I guess it put a question into my mind, and that's really what I'm coming back around to, just to ask the question, is we are getting this project from the state contracted with an engineer, contracted with a contractor, built it, they inspected it, and they're going to hand it to us. And where are we a year from now if something is there any warranties? Are we made aware of change orders through the project? Any problems with the design that had to be modified? Those kind of things. I realize that's a lot of effort, but we're receiving something not completely blind. I mean, the city doesn't have an inspector out there, so a bit, and I'm just wondering what assurances we have from the state that the project will perform as it was supposed to be, as designed, a year or 2 years from now. If something fails, and what do we know about what's gone on in the construction out there? I realize we're going to do a final walkthrough with them, but maybe that's a lot of questions, but I think you kind of get the general concern I have of just what is it we're taking over.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Naxted. My understanding of pave and trades from the state to municipalities is that there's no specific warranty. Whether or not there's some recourse that the city could take if there was a significant failure due to construction methods or a failure in the design, I guess I would probably defer to the city attorney to see if there was some type of recourse we could take there. The involvement that we've had in the project is we were given an opportunity to review the design prior to construction, which we did. We haven't been specifically notified of any change orders that occurred during the project, but we have had good communication with the project managers from the state on the project. Scott Curtin has addressed several issues with the project manager over time. He has done a final, or at least maybe not final, but he's done a drive-through with the project manager and looked at the project. He's comfortable with the project. He likes the way the project turned out. I will tell you that your efforts on behalf of several issues on the project have helped. For example, the culvert that had problems this spring, they did make some modifications to that culvert to hopefully alleviate that freezing problem in the spring. The luminaires, we've worked through that. So we have had good communication with the state, but my understanding is that there is no warranty per se. I've certainly seen in other instances where there have been paving trades from the state where a warranty would have come in awfully handy, but as far as I'm aware, there is not one.
Yeah, I would have probably just come in and said what a great project it is. It looks great, and it does. But after that conversation that I wasn't really looking forward to having, I was doing something else. Today, it gives me pause. And here's the construction contractor talking to a person in the public. He didn't know who I was, I don't think, in such a way that led me to believe that maybe there's some other problems with it. And now it's like I'm getting a rebuilt used car that I thought was going to be like new, but now I'm not so sure what's under the hood. And I'm not sure what we can do. If there's some kind of a resolution, or whatever to the state, based on, I'm not even sure where I want to go with that, but, it seems like we need to have some kind of recourse or some kind of a position and time that, if we agree that we have some concerns about what may or may not be there. And maybe it's unfounded, but we really won't know that for a few years. So there's no real question in that, I guess. But I guess I can meet with Scott and we could draft up some kind of a resolution if it makes sense. Whether the state it would be just a statement from the city.
And I can have discussions with Scott Curtin and with Scott Bloom to see if there's something that makes sense. What I can do also is reach out to that supervisor to try to determine more accurately what was meant by that comment, whether or not it was a bust for QAP because they didn't make as much money as they wanted on the project, or if there was something else that was occurring there. But we can do both of those things.
Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Henry. I'm friends with a fair amount of the people that worked on that project and have heard some things off and on and didn't really think much of it. I figured that we were in the loop or whatever, but I'd recommend maybe, following up with a list of questions that have been brought up and maybe a letter to them asking a response from them. If we've heard this, and this, we'd like you to tell us about them. Maybe have Scott write it up. But anyway, just an idea.
Any other questions of the city manager, comments? Seeing none, we'll move to the city.
Real quick,
Councilmember Navarre.
just another suggestion on that. Maybe in the agreement, when you finally sign it all off, and you take it as, if there's any contingency left, that be held in reserve for 1 year or something like that. Maybe we can think outside the box on something that hasn't been done before. I don't know if that's appropriate or if there's any left, but that might be one solution. I remember on the right here in the city of Kenai, right at the Arby's corner, they made it a point, and all those big trucks couldn't make the turn, so they had to make it a curve, because they originally designed it right up to a point, like here's the point. Well, all those big trucks were turning to go down bridge access, and they realized, so there was some design issues that they corrected themselves on that, and that was their project. It wasn't the city taking over. But those type of things I think can happen and could happen, as Councilmember Next has stated. So maybe there's something outside the box, or maybe there's something in that transfer agreement that stipulates that. I haven't seen one, so, but anyway, thanks.
Any other questions for the city manager? Comments? Seeing none, we'll move to the city attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. I don't have anything to report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, it was mentioned about the extensions regarding Keystone subdivision. And just a thought, maybe a conversation I had with somebody, I don't recall, but do we have any requirement that a plat be accomplished within a certain time frame? Or there's a limit to the amount of extensions they can have? How long can something just fester and grow and just be there?
Thank you, Councilmember Glendenning. We don't have anything in our code. The borough does in their code. All plats that were done after 2014, they have to be done within 2 years. And then there's an opportunity for two-year extensions, so there's an opportunity for a total of 6 years. For plats that were done prior to 2014, there is no time limit. They are working at the administrative level at this point on an ordinance to put a time limit on pre-2014 plats. And I talked to Scott Huff over there, and he said as soon as they have a draft that they're ready, they'll give it to our Planning and Zoning Commission for a recommendation.
Okay, and this being said, in this regard, the borough is the 51%er, so, but yet they will honor, or at least look seriously at any requests or observations we have. Is that correct, regarding timing of plats, in your view?
Yeah, we're only advisory, but, you know, they generally take our recommendations unless they're unreasonable. Could we put a timeline in our own code? Potentially, you know, regarding plats within the city of Kenai, if we wanted a different time frame, I think we could work on that. I'd like to see what the borough comes up with first.
Thank you. Yeah, it's probably smoother if we tuck in with the borough's approach, and I'm sure they're aware of the situation, and they'll accept your input. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of the city attorney? Seeing none, we'll move to the city clerk, Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. I've just been busy working on developing tomorrow's election work session, and also working with administration to develop their monster agendas and packets with some fun Robert's rules. And we'll keep on plugging away. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, did I understand we were to have a packet tonight, or that's, I mean, like,
Oh, paper for the
does it
election.
involve dead trees? Yep. Oh, thank you.
Oh. Well, you sent out electronic also, I think. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes, Councilmember Glendenning.
I tried the electronic, and I got to about page 36, and then it was fade to black. I could scroll down, and random page would come up, and no luck. And I'm doing the best. I have this and my Wi-Fi, so I don't know, maybe it's a technological impasse, or my pipe isn't big enough on the Wi-Fi. But thank you for trying anyway, and I did look at it.
My electrons are well trained at home, and I was able to download the whole thing and look at it.
Any other questions of the city clerk? Questions,
I'll
comments?
see you later.
Seeing none, we'll move to additional public comment. Is there any from the general public that'd like to address the council at this time? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move to council comments, and we'll start with Councilmember Next, and here to my left.
Okay, well, don't have too much. The Old Town Market, Mr. Ostrander called me, hey, have you seen this? And I guess I knew it was coming, I just didn't know it had. And So I've actually gone twice. I went this weekend, Saturday, my wife, and I went the weekend before. And there was about the same time of day, around noon, because we had hot dogs, but I'd say there was twice as many people and a third more vendors there. And so, and actually the first weekend when we were there, we lingered for a while, ate in our car, but people were coming in and looking and trying to decide what they wanted to do. They were circling, coming in and going, and this time there were more people kind of finding places to park and actually there. So it's one of those things that just takes a while, but I encourage you to go. They've got all kinds of fun stuff there. Sometimes a magician and all that. It's good for the kids. So.
Awesome. Councilmember, or Vice Mayor Malloy?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I just want to congratulate Finance Director Eubank on breaking the record for legislation ordinances, in the packet, and administration and council have been doing a lot of work. We've had 5-page agendas for several meetings now, so lots been going on. Appreciate what everybody's been doing. So I've sort of held off on bringing that resolution about amending the policy for the Parks and Recreation Commission on student representative, and I think I'm looking at maybe the second meeting in July now, because it looks like our first meeting is probably going to be pretty extensive also in July, and we'll have another COVID program to talk about. So I'm thinking about bringing that forward, maybe the second meeting in July. Thanks.
Yeah, it was interesting. I almost started laughing when Mr. O'Shannon asked if we've noticed the amount of legislation in the pack, and I'm pretty sure we all have when I downloaded it. Yeah.
Last meeting was 6 hours.
Yeah. Councilmember Peterkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just echo what my colleague said. Thanks, Terry, for your work, and Scott, Jamie, and Paul. Very, very good, and good meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, thanks for the COVID update, and I think your leadership in adjudicating the finances that have appeared on our doorstep is showing throughout the borough, and I think it'll wind up with a positive outcome for all concerned. I saw, did I hear was it on the radio, or I read, or I saw on social media? Anyway, the chamber was talking about the Old Town arrangement with the market, and I was pleased to see that. And then also there was mention of the Diamond M Ranch. They're having a summer solstice event, and was it Aaron Tippin, the country singer, is going to be there. There'll be magician things for kids and all of that. So it'll be I think a welcome break if we just like the city is here and the Diamond M is here. So it's just a small little step to go into a place of social activity, and I think a good time will be had by all. And we had a good meeting, and again, thank you, Terry. I don't know how you do it, but you do it, and that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Petty.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate everyone's input and a vigorous conversation this evening. Also, I truly appreciate and want to say thank you to the administration, to Terry, to Paul, and to Scott, and for Jamie, to make our town looking out for our bottom line, because when we're looking out for our bottom line, it helps our citizens to be more profitable in the fact that our taxes are maintained low. So I want to graciously and wholeheartedly thank you for that. Also, I'm very, very thankful and very appreciative of moving forward with our bluff erosion, and When November comes, I would like to see, when we get to sign that pet agreement, that there would be some sort of wonderful celebration when those signatures go down in ink. And so I look forward to having the opportunity to witness that. So blessings to everyone, and thank you for everyone's work tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarre.
First, I'll start out with, unfortunately, Industry Days is going to be canceled this year after talking to a number of the volunteers, both Unocal retirees to the fishermen to the chambers to the Coke wagon volunteers to the you name it. And unfortunately, it's just like you're hearing from a lot of different areas. There's some concerns with some of the volunteers that they're not going to be able to be there because of their own health risks and that, and you have to respect that. And yet it takes a lot to put on an event like that. I just want the public to be reassured. I know from even the sponsors, they've already been asking, you know, are we going to be able to participate this year? You know, they're ready to jump in. But we'll be ready a year from now and go from there. It's just unfortunate, but you can't put people at risk and do that. Even our own City of Kenai Public Recreation or Parks and Rec that do a tremendous job down there, from collecting garbage to putting out the tables and electric and all of those things. It's, you know, you have to be concerned on all fronts. And then even having any kind of things, whether we've had the National Guard before where their blow up enjoyment for young kids and teens to, you know, the smaller ones with some of the jumping junction items. We just, you know, how you keep them safe. So I think a year from now, I think everybody will be better. I mean, people want to put it on. All of us wanted to find a way. But really, and even talking to the Borough Mayor's office, he had to agree. He said it just can't go on this year, just from all the impacts of what's included. So unfortunately, you'll start hearing about that. I mentioned earlier I was on a conversation. I just want you to know I honestly believe, and in the conversation that I was able to be part of, AML put together in every community around the state. They're starting early in talking to their legislators about different priorities and different issues. And I talked to you about Paul saying what's happening in COVID and where everybody's doing different things. But the one thing he didn't forget when he had all of them there is he did talk about the DOT project. And as he stated to us the last meeting, that, you know, why can't DOT let us do some of these projects and do them for, you know, a lot less, especially when we're on the hook for a match. And so it was an opportunity to again, we had Senator Stevens on there from Kodiak, we had Senator Machicki, we had Representative Carpenter, Knopp, and Vance, I think all, as well as representatives from all the communities up and down the peninsula, from Seward to Homer to Kenai to Soldotna, the whole works. So I think AML's under the leadership of Nils Andreasen is doing a terrific job. He's helped a lot of communities with information on this COVID and have them understand, as well as he's engaging, making sure the legislature understands community priorities. So, And I too want to thank the administration throughout this whole virus health emergency, how well our city has handled the issue and continues to get work done and produce good results, so we're not playing too much catch up. And I was talking to one council member earlier that, you know, Terry's in this particular job and all these numbers and all this new changes. I'm glad we have who we have at the finance director at the city of Kenai, because he's going to handle it well. And if he has to do some quick laydowns and adjustments, he's got my full support to continue to do that and move it along. So great job. And finally, I don't know, and I'm comfortable, Madam Clerk, for staying right here, and I'm more than likely going to be gone on the second meeting in July, just so you know. But I did notice from sitting here that Councilmember Glendenning is using 2 different mics at his convenience. And so I just wanted to make sure he doesn't get too used to it, because one day we'll get back up there all together. But anyway, with that, everybody stay safe, healthy, and we'll see you on the 1st.
Thank you. And we have no executive session scheduled, and seeing no other business before this body, we are adjourned.